Okay, boys, this is a very quick summary, very quick video summarising the things we've been learning about in this unit on Islam, on the 5 pillars, the things you will need to know for your assessment. This doesn't cover everything, it doesn't help you answer the essay question, but it does tell you some of the things that we've covered. So it's a very quick summary, very quick video to just go through all that again. So the first thing we looked at was who are Muslims. We thought a little bit about what it's like to maybe live as a Muslim in this country. We thought about Islamophobia. Islamophobia is the fear of Muslims or hatred for Muslims, which some people have shown in different places in the world for various reasons. And we thought about the positive Muslim role models in this country, getting involved with sport, getting involved with the police, getting involved with teaching, things like that. We also thought about where Muslims lived around the world, and we noted that a lot of Muslims live in the Middle East, which is where Islam originates from. Islam originally comes from Saudi Arabia, and particularly from Mecca. And there it is on that map there. But there's also some Muslims in North Africa and the rest of the Middle East, and in Asia, and all over the world. But these are the Muslim majority countries. And then we moved on and we thought about the 5 pillars, and there are 5. We found out that there are 5 pillars, and these pillars are things that Muslims believe help them to uphold their faith. So they are really central, they are all compulsory, they are all things that Muhammad spoke about, all things that happened that are mentioned in the Quran. And these 5 things help them to keep going as Muslims and to keep serving Allah, who they believe is God. The first one is Shahada, that is the statement of belief. Second one is Salah, prayer. Third one is Zakah, giving to charity. Fourth one is Saum, which is fasting during Ramadan. And the 5th one is Hajj, pilgrimage to Mecca. So the first one is Shahada. Shahada is the statement of the key beliefs of a Muslim, and the Shahada says there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet, is his messenger. And that means that that Islam is a faith that is centered on the belief that there is only one true God who stands alone and should be worshipped alone. And that God is Allah. So no one else is God. So Muhammad isn't God, Jesus isn't God, the gods of Hinduism are not gods, there are no other gods. Allah is the only God. That is what Muslims believe. That means that they completely disagree with the Christian beliefs about the Trinity and about Jesus being God. But they believe that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, and Muhammad reveals Allah's words to people, and that becomes then the Quran. So the Shahada is a statement of what Muslims believe, and the other 4 pillars and then actions that flow from these beliefs. In order for someone to become a Muslim, they must say the Shahada 3 times in front of at least 2 witnesses. So the Shahada is really central to someone becoming a Muslim. It's also really important when someone's born, because if someone is born into a Muslim family, then the first thing that they hear whispered in their ear is the Shahada. There is no God but Allah, Muhammad is his prophet. And then when someone dies who's a Muslim, then if at all possible, the last thing that they hear whispered in their ear is the Shahada. There's no God but Allah, but Muhammad, and Muhammad is his prophet. Here's a quotation from the Quran. There is no God but Allah, and that's Surah 3:18. Surah is the name for their chapters. And then Allah knows that you, Muhammad, are his messenger, Surah 63. So that just sums up the Shahada there. Okay, the next pillar we looked at was Salah, or Salah. Salah is compulsory prayers for Muslims 5 times a day. 5 times a day, so it's very disciplined. Cleanliness is very important. Cleanliness, so they kneel on a prayer mat. They take off their shoes and they wash themselves carefully beforehand, and that is called wudu. Muslims sometimes pray in a mosque, which is the holy place of worship in Islam. And when praying, they face the Kaaba, a building in Mecca in Saudi Arabia, which the Muslims believe is the house of God on earth. Muslim prayers take about 5 to 10 minutes each time. They pray 5 times a day from the age of 10, if not younger. And when they pray, they say certain words and they perform certain actions, and that is called rak'ah. So rak'ah is is a unit of prayer. It's the cycle of prayer. Friday prayers at the mosque are very important, particularly for men. Men particularly go to the mosque on Friday. Now, there are two groups of Muslims. The first are called Sunnis, the second are called Shias. There are other groups as well. But this is a way in which Sunnis and Shias disagree. Sunnis pray 5 times a day, Shias pray 3 times a day. Now, why do Muslims pray? This is really important. Why do they pray? For lots of reasons. They pray because the Quran tells them to pray. So here's a quotation from the Quran. Perform prayers at both ends of the day and at night time. Surah 11. So why do they pray? Because the Quran tells them to, because Allah tells them to. But also because it reminds them that God is with them. It reminds them that Allah is there. It reminds them that they should praise Allah. It reminds them that they are in submission to Allah. It helps them to do good and avoid evil. They can ask God for guidance in making difficult decisions. They can thank God for what he has done. And Muhammad himself prayed, so he is the role model there. Right, the third pillar was zakah. Zakah is the practice of giving money to charity, and a Muslim should give 2.5%, 2.5% of their surplus wealth. So that is whatever they have left after they have paid all the necessary things. And that could be things like food and basic clothing and rent and things like that. It's paid once a year, often during Ramadan. Ramadan is this special month of fasting. So at the end of that, that's often when they pay their zakah. And it's distributed to the poor and needy. The poor and needy, particularly to the Muslim poor and needy. And it's compulsory for Muslims, so everyone has to do it. Why do? They do it because it helps Muslims to rid themselves of greed and selfishness. But also, they do it because it is good to support those who are less well off than ourselves, and also because they believe that all money, all of this belongs to Allah in the first place. It all belongs to Allah in the first place. Here's a quotation from the Quran: "You shall give to relatives, the poor, the needy, and to travellers." The fourth pillar is Sawm. Sawm is fasting. Muslims fast during the month of Ramadan. Ramadan takes place during the 9th month of the Islamic year. And that moves depending on the moon. This month is important because Muslims believe that the first verses of the Quran were revealed to Muhammad during the month of Ramadan. Fasting during Ramadan is required. Other types of fasting at other types of the year can also happen, but Ramadan is a really important point to do fasting. And the fasting happens during daylight hours. So when it is dark, they are allowed to eat. Pregnant women and elderly people and people who are ill and people who are travelling don't need to fast. But they should fast later. They should fast later. And if they are not able to fast at all because they're not well or they're elderly, then they need to pay for someone else to be able to eat, someone who is poor and needy. During Ramadan, people are not allowed to eat during daylight hours. They're not allowed to drink. They're not allowed to smoke. And they're not allowed to have sex. Some Muslims try to read the whole of the Quran during Ramadan, so the whole of the Muslim holy book. During Ramadan, people say a Ramadan Mubarak to each other, which means have a blessed Ramadan, and they send cards. At the end of each day, there's a simple meal, which includes dates, which is a type of fruit. It's called the Itfar. And then there's a big feast at the end of Ramadan called Eid al-Fitr, and that lasts for 3 days. Why do Muslims fast? Well, it's a spiritual discipline. It helps them concentrate on prayer and worship of Allah without distractions. So as I said in lessons, if you are in a lesson and it's 5 minutes before lunch or it's 5 minutes before you go off to play football somewhere, often you can lose focus on what's happening in the lesson because you're thinking about what's coming up. Muslims think if you take out eating and drinking and these other things during Ramadan, during the daylight hours, then you can focus more on Allah, more on prayer, things like that. Also, when food and drink and other things are taken away, it reminds Muslims how thankful they should be for them. So if we didn't have the food that we had at school, if we If we went to certain parts of the country, certain parts of the world where people didn't have proper education, where people lived in huts and didn't have the kind of resources that we did, then we would be really thankful when we came back. And that is what fasting is like for a Muslim. Here's a quotation from the Quran. Ramadan is the month in which the Quran was revealed. Whoever is not travelling must fast during that month. That's from Surah 2. Muslims are required to go on a pilgrimage, Hajj, to Mecca at least once in their lifetime, if at all possible. And that's our fifth pillar, Hajj, okay, which is pilgrimage. Mecca is in Saudi Arabia in the Middle East. Muhammad was born there in 570 AD. It contains the Kaaba, which is a cube-shaped black building. According to the Quran, Adam built the original Kaaba, and then Abraham rebuilt it. But now there's a massive mosque there, and millions of people, millions of Muslims go there. It's so holy that someone who's not a Muslim is not allowed to go into Mecca. The Hajj takes 5 days. It takes place over 5 days. People travel in groups. Men have to wear ihram, which is 2 pieces of white cloth. It represents purity. So the fact that it's white, they're all clothed in white, shows that they are pure, they're good, and it also shows that everyone is equal. Some people don't have flashy clothes, and other people have really tatty clothes. Everyone is wearing the same kind of thing. And there's a list of things that people are not allowed to do, a bit like Ramadan, a list of things people are not allowed to do when they're on Hajj. For example, they're not allowed to have sex, they're not allowed to cover their head, they're not allowed to get married, they're not allowed to carry weapons, they're not allowed to swear, they're not allowed to shave. Muslims carry out lots of rituals when on the Hajj. They do things like going around the Kaaba and throwing stones at different pillars and running between the hills, representing Hagar running to look for water. Lots of different rituals. And remember, there are hundreds of thousands of people doing that. Here's a quotation from the Quran. And announce to the people that they will observe the pilgrimage, they will perform their duties, fulfill their promises, and visit the ancient shrine. And that's from Surah 22. So those are the 5 pillars. Those things are all really central to someone who is a Muslim, to what it means for them to be a Muslim, and also how they live their day-to-day life. Hajj is one of these big things. Maybe once in a lifetime someone will go on Hajj. Things like prayer, salah, happens every day. Shahada is what they believe. So it is all really central to what it means to be a Muslim. You need to know a lot of that to do well in your assessment. You also need to start thinking about the question, which of these do you think is the most important? Why do you think these are important to Muslims? Remember, in RE Boys, you've got to understand not just the facts, not just the knowledge bit, but you've got to understand why it's important for a religious person, how he makes a difference.